Howdy doody duties. Glad you came back today. We've got a few things we've been doing here at the Winchester Cathedral. Got some new cards printed up. Last week I gave one out to an old boy and he called me on it. He said, USOB, and I said, you're right, that stands for Student of the Bible. He said, that was really meaningful. I got a lot out of that and I really enjoyed it. Well, that's good. I want you to enjoy these things, but I also want you to know things. I'm not asking you to believe anything, because belief is just loaded with doubt. But I am asking you to consider what we say. Check it out for yourself. I imagine most of you are on the internet, just like I am and everybody else. And I don't know if you've got this or not. I got this as an email, and this one... it talks about a radio show by Dr. Laura Schlesinger that said that as an observant Orthodox Jew, homosexuality is an abomination according to Leviticus 18:22 and cannot be condoned under any circumstance. And the following response, and I'm going to read this to you because this was really entertaining and good. The following response is an open letter to Dr. Laura, written by a U.S. college professor and posted on the internet. It's funny as well as informative for everybody who takes every Bible verse literally. Well, before I want to get into this, I want to explain a little bit about the book they're talking about. Well, there is some Genesis in here, but most of it is about Leviticus. Now, that's the book of the laws. That's one of them. And it was written at the time that they needed all those laws. Would you believe there are 600 laws in the book of Leviticus that the Hebrews were supposed to observe? Well, they narrowed that down later to 140 some laws that were strictly about spiritual things. And then old Moses, remember him and his brother Aaron, how they took all those people out of Egypt and had them all over the desert looking for the promised land. And old Moses lowered those down to what we know as the 10 Commandments. Think about that. From 600 laws down to 140 and down to 10 commandments. Well, those commandments are basically social laws. They're for the civilization and the community. They're very good to observe and to know. But they're not all the law. And Leviticus, of course, had all the law. But here's the rub. You see, this was for the laws of them. Now you got to remember, Moses had with him over 1 million people out in the desert. And they'd been in captivity for many, many years. And they didn't know how to govern themselves or what to do. So a lot of these laws are for health reasons. And believe it or not, some of the laws in Leviticus, modern science and modern medicine is using today as ways to prevent and to cure disease, which is not a bad thing. So I'm going to read this to you, and then I'll try to explain it as I go along. Dear Dr. Laura, thank you for doing so much to educate people regarding God's law. I've learned a great deal from your show, and I try to share that knowledge with as many people as I can. When someone tries to defend the homosexual lifestyle, for example, I simply remind them that Leviticus 18:22, and that's true, clearly states it to be an abomination. End of debate. One of the things he didn't say is that after every one of these laws that says thou shouldn't do this, or the Lord considers it to be an abomination, he says, I am the Lord. Yeah, think of that. 600 times he has to repeat, I am the Lord. That makes me suspect right then. Because if it's really the Lord speaking, you don't need to keep repeating it, do you? He says, I do need some advice from you, however, regarding some other elements of God's laws and how to follow them. In Leviticus 25:44, it states that I may possess slaves, both male and female, provided they are from neighboring nations. A friend of mine claims that this applies to the Mexicans, but not the Canadians. Can you clarify, why can't I own Canadians? Well, if they had kept reading 2 more verses down, it says you can have them from the north too. So what difference would it make? And then he says, number 2, I'd like to sell my daughter into slavery as sanctioned in Exodus 21 verse 7. In this day and age, what do you think would be a fair price for her? Yep, it says that too. Well, you got to remember, during those times, women weren't even counted. Remember when Moses took them out? They said they had 500,000 men. They didn't say anything about how many women. And in those days, sometimes a man would have more than one wife, and a lot of, and nothing about kids, because kids, the old-time people in the Bible times, they didn't pay a lot of attention to the kids. One reason was a lot of them didn't live but past the age of 5. Another reason was they didn't care about them being anything special until they got up into the adult stage, or until they, as we call it, bar mitzvah. That means that at the age of 13 they accept the responsibilities of an adult. You know, we're only allowed 10 minutes here, so I got to be really brief about all the things I do for you. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today is one of my expressions, and I look at these things and I say, bullshit. And that's an acronym. That isn't what it sounds like. What it means is because under love and law, seeing holiness in this is what I'm doing. So when I slip and say that, you just understand that's what I mean. But one of the things I want to talk about was Abraham. In the Bible, and we've talked about him before, about how old he was and how old Sarah was when she had a child. But what we didn't talk about is how he would have his slaves and his servants swear to him. Now, in the old days, to swear, it says in the Bible, place your hand under my thigh. That ain't what it means. They interpret it that way. What it says is, put your hand on my testicles. Testicles is where we get the word testify and testament. It stands to reason, doesn't it? But it's true. That's why even the Egyptian priests would have those front gowns, remember, and they stuck way out. It was because they put a lot of faith and a lot of meaning into the genitalia of the male animals, so to speak. Now, here's another one. I know that I'm allowed no contact with a woman while she's in her period or menstrual uncleanliness. That's in Leviticus 19 and 24. The problem is, how do I tell? I've tried asking, but most women take offense. Well, I'm not even going to get into that one. But if you read it, go down 4 more verses, and it tells you what the whole thing is. And you see, back in those days, they didn't really know what all that was. That was a mystery. They knew that they planted the seed, but they just thought it was their seed growing inside the woman's belly. All she was a receptacle. And then she'd become unclean. Oh. And then he says, when I burn a bull at the altar as a sacrifice, I know it creates a pleasing odor for the Lord. Leviticus 1:9. The problem is my neighbors, they claim the odor is not pleasing to them. Should I smite them? And that's what it says. In Leviticus it says if they don't do that, kill the bastards. Well, a friend of mine feels that even though eating shellfish is an abomination, Leviticus 11:10, it's a lesser abomination than homosexuality. Is it? I don't agree. Can you settle this? Are there degrees of abomination? Leviticus 21:20 says that I can't approach the altar of God if I have a defect in my sight. Well, I have to wear that I wear reading glasses. And does my vision have to be 20/20, or is there some wiggle room in there? Most of my male friends get their hair trimmed, including the hair around the temples, even though this is expressly forbidden in Leviticus 19:27, and it says that if they don't keep their hair with the little braids, kill them. How do you think we should kill them, he says. I know that from Leviticus 11:6-8 that touching the skin of a dead pig makes me unclean, but should I ask my football team to wear gloves? My uncle has a farm. He violates Leviticus 19:19 by planting 2 different crops in the same field. Well, I'm not going to go on with this, but there's a lot of things that were written that were important. And next week, I'm going to tell you why they were important. God bless you. I'll see you next week.